Well, good evening and welcome into a Friday edition of KC Sports Tonight, where we once again have a jam-packed show full of topics as we do every day here at KCTV5. I'm Mark Poulose, joined by the great Gabe Swartz. Gabe, how you doing today on this Friday?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing good. Here we go, going into the weekend. Got a lot of juice, a lot of energy, feeling good. Four big topics today. We're going to start with the one that's probably the talk of the town. Baseball fans all around Kansas City in a little bit of a funk because the Royals are in a 4-game slide. They were swept in New York by the Yankees. Then they go to Detroit, lose game one of the series, the game one of the series against the Tigers, 6-1. Now lost 6 of their last 7. Gabe, the offense has not been pretty. I believe they're third worst in the major leagues in scoring, third worst in batting average. We said on our 5 o'clock tease we're going to have a glass half full, glass half empty perspective. I'll lob that to your court. Which one do you want to start with first?
I would say I'll go with the glass half full, and that being that Cole Reagans is off to one of the best seasons in franchise history for a starting pitcher, and he leads a pitching staff that is top. I believe I just checked. They're 7th in the league in ERA, and they're very close to being one of the top 5 teams in the league in ERA. So the pitching is still very good. I think that was one of the things that we were concerned about throughout the offseason was, is the starting pitching in particular going to regress? It hasn't to this point. They've been in every game, and that's what is amazing is that they're 8-12, and that's not ideal, but they are not super far out of division that is not being taken over by anyone at this point. Like the Tigers are the best team at this point, but they're not separating themselves significantly. And if the Royals can grab a couple this weekend, they'll be in okay shape. And most of that has to do with the fact that every single night it seems like the starting pitcher is going out there and giving them a chance. Now, that leads us to the glass half empty part, which is that the offense is doing worse than just the bare minimum. And not being one of the teams that, like last year, they were incredible hitting with runners in scoring position. This year they've been awful hitting with runners in scoring position. If that just finds some level of middle ground, they just need to be an average offense to be a good team because the pitching is so good.
Well, I think just as you said there, at the end of your glass half empty, it kind of leads to the glass half full. Is that if they do really just turn just a couple things around, because I think right now they have one of the lowest batting averages in all of baseball, runners in scoring position, also one of the lowest batting average for balls in play. If they can get any of that to kind of regress to the mean, I think we'd really see some improvement. But just as you said, I think the pitching here has been just everything that any Royals fan could have ever expected. The starting pitching is doing extremely well. That was a big question going into this year. But I think a lot of fans are kind of looking at some of the bullpen moves made by manager Matt Quatraro and kind of scratching their head. But I think at the end of the day, I don't understand how people can really call those into question when the offense is just not performing. I think it's 2 weeks to the day today since the Royals scored 4 runs or more in a baseball game. And in the modern era of baseball, that's just not going to get it done. But a glass half full perspective, I would say this is about as bad as the Royals can play, and they're 8-12. And this is the floor, I would say, of the team, because unless the pitching got way worse, but that is a team that's built.
That's not very reasonable.
Yeah, it's not a reasonable thing to expect. So I think glass half full is that this is as bad as they can play, and they're really not that far out of it. I mean, obviously it's 20 games into the season, but that's a legitimate sample size. What I think leads into our glass half empty perspective is that this offense is just in no way, shape, or form producing. I believe Bobby Witt Jr. is the only player batting above 300. I think Mikel Garcia is batting around 260, and then everyone else is hovering around the Mendoza line. And it's just like, we can wait. We can say it's early. 20 games is 20 games. That's 1/8 of the season. And the Royals offense, I think in 20 games they scored 59 total runs. And there's no pitching staff that can overcome that.
Yeah, and if I was going to dip back into the glass half empty perspective, and what is discouraging, I would say, is that Bobby Witt Jr. is on a 10-game hitting streak, and he's hitting around 400 in that time span, so the last 10 games, because he wasn't awful by any stretch of the matter, but he wasn't having his typical multi-hit games and doing all that kind of stuff during the first 10 games of the season. Now you're at the point where he's kind of getting things going. He's still yet to hit for a ton of power. I know he hit a home run
Yankee Stadium.
At Yankee Stadium, and he had one off the top of the wall last night in Detroit. But they're not taking advantage of when he gets on base. Like last night, for example, Jonathan India gets on base with a single in the first inning. Bobby gets a walk, and then Vinny flies out, Salvi strikes out, Michael Massey strikes out. The
Or the
first and
inning
second,
yesterday.
nobody. Yeah, that's the formula. But first and second, nobody out, and neither of the guys touched third base, let alone scoring. So the middle of the order is not doing enough. Jonathan India's in a little bit of a slump. It seems like he's flying out a lot, which is odd. I think that he's still working through.
He's adjusting to ballparks big time.
Yeah, the swing that he was used to in Cincinnati versus what works in the AL Central. It's a little bit different.
Well, I know a lot of Royals fans are maybe saying, maybe making some excuses, saying that the Royals, 6 of the first 7 teams were playoff teams a year ago. They're facing tough competition, but guess what? The Royals were in the playoffs last year. If the Royals want to get to where they want to be, they have to beat these teams. If you want to be the best, you got to beat the best, and you can't be afraid of competition. But one thing that we do, maybe ending here on a glass half full with the Royals, is that none of their players are producing at the level that they, like Vinny Pasquantino and Sal Perez, are going to produce better than this. This is not this. We know what type of Major League Baseball players they are. We've seen them do it before, and if we can just see them kind of get into the swing of things. I know yesterday manager Matt Quattrero said this is a game of routines. They're kind of hoping that their own guys kind of break through, but we're going to have to see some improvement there from the Royals because it's 20 games in, Things are happening. The season's moving along. We got to see some improvement. All right, moving on. The NFL draft is less than 1 week away, starting next Thursday up in Green Bay, Wisconsin, of all places. I can't believe it. 2 years ago here in Kansas City, now they're in Green Bay. That's a huge downgrade if you ask me. But no offense to the people of Green Bay or Wisconsin, but I'm riding with Kansas City. But a lot of people are kind of speculating as to the position that Kansas City is going to draft here in the first round. We know the Chiefs have a need for an offensive lineman, specifically an offensive tackle. And on the defensive line, there's a lot of analysts saying that there's going to be a lot of good defensive end, edge rushing prospects. Gabe, we know that's kind of what industry analysts are thinking. Do you kind of see the Chiefs as necessarily targeting a specific position, or do you see them maybe taking just the best player available?
I don't think that they have to target a specific position. Neil and I kind of talked about this yesterday on the show about whether they should take another swing at offensive tackle. I know that there's some discussion out there that they've had or they're having Josh Simmons, the tackle from Ohio State, in for a top 30 visit and trying to figure out whether they trust the medicals on him because he's a guy who injured his knee during the season and had that cut short. So if you draft him, you just signed Jalen Moore in free agency. You've got Jawan Taylor. So your tackles seem to be figured out for the 2025 season. Now, whether that plan goes according to plan or not remains to be seen because there was a plan last offseason, and it did not go according to plan once the action actually began in September. So are they willing to take another redshirt year for a first-round pick? They've done that a couple times with Felix and Udike Uzama a couple years ago. I think that the Chiefs are in a spot where they've filled out everything on their roster to the point where there's no glaring holes other than they need a contributor at running back. But I don't think that a contributor at running back needs to be the pick at 31. So I think they're pretty freed up. And I look at this point, I'm going into next Thursday thinking the Chiefs could go so many different directions. Whereas last year, I was pretty set on the opinion that the Chiefs were going to come out of Thursday night with some wide receiver, and it was just a matter of which one.
Just kind of talking to a lot of Chiefs fans and kind of just seeing reading the room, how they're feeling. I feel like a lot of fans want the Chiefs to draft an offensive lineman. It brings up the question, just as you were talking about, are the Chiefs willing to have another first-round pick redshirt, ride the pine for a year? And for a team, I think that's so focused on winning now. I mean, maximizing Patrick Mahomes' prime, maximizing potentially probably the last year of Travis Kelce. I don't understand how maybe your greatest way to impact a roster moving on for the rest of the year. I don't understand how you can necessarily use that on a player who is not going to play. This isn't like college where you can afford to sit guys and you have other guys coming in. Like this is a professional league, and they have to win right now. We can't win for later on in the future. And so I know a lot of people are saying the Chiefs are going to draft an offensive tackle, but it's like if that player is not going to be on the field, like what are we doing? And but the flip side of that is if you see a guy that could be a potential franchise left tackle in the future, and it could be you think it could be a starter for 8 years, 10 years. You have to draft them. That puts you in a weird position with Jalen Moore, and then obviously with Jawan Taylor.
Well, I think it just comes down to are they comfortable with the medicals, and do they truly think this is a top 10 talent who is only going to be at the back half of the first round because of the fact that there are medical concerns, where you've seen that the Chiefs essentially hit the lottery with Trey Smith in the 6th round because they were willing to take the risk, or at least they believed that there was a plan in place to make sure that Trey Smith's medicals, when he was coming out of Tennessee and there were concerns, that those weren't as great of a concern for them, and that they were just going to bet on the blue chip talent being a blue chip. So it's obviously different taking that risk in the 6th round versus taking that risk in the 1st round. But that hasn't changed, or that risk hasn't been the reason that the Chiefs have strayed away from making decisions in the 1st and 2nd round in previous years. They've traded up for Kingsley last year. They traded up for Rashee Rice as a 2nd round pick a couple years ago. They traded up for Trent McDuffie. If Brett Veach likes somebody, there could be a trade up opportunity. So we'll see.
Well, I thought Veach had a lot of interesting comments yesterday when he said maybe there's only 12 to 13 players that they have a first-round grade on. And then also there's a lot of people saying, we've talked about this already, that the Chiefs are maybe targeting a defensive lineman where they are sitting there at 31. But Veach was saying that the deepest positions, I believe, are, he said, defensive end and running back. So it's just like, I really don't see a general manager saying something like that and then drafting a defensive end in the 1st round, because it seems to be the Chiefs as an organization think that's just a very, very deep position. I think also a lot of fans maybe kind of dreaming up a scenario of wanting to trade back, but I think I don't know if there's a lot of people that are trying to trade up into it's going to have to be a kind of crazy scenario. Maybe a quarterback falls there in the draft where the Chiefs would be able to make a trade, which kind of leads to our next topic of conversation here, the number 1 pick in the 2025 NFL draft. Gabe, I know there's some names floating around. There's Cam Ward from my alma mater, Shedeur Sanders, Travis Hunter, Abdul Carter. Who do you kind of think is what do you think is going to happen at number 1? And then do you think maybe we'll see 2 quarterbacks taken early?
Well, I'm a little more online than Neil Jones is.
I don't think Neil knows what the internet is.
So
ask him when he tries to feedback stories.
Yeah, I'll tell you things that I can guarantee that Neil Jones was not seeing this week. But it came across my timeline that Cam Ward was streaming Fortnite on Twitch this week, and he was asked who the best running backs in the league are, who the top 4 running backs in the league are. And he said Tony Pollard and Tyjae Spears. Then he was asked who the best wide receiver in the league is, and he said several names, the usual suspects, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson. And then he threw in Treylon Burks, who is very clearly not a top 4 wide receiver.
I don't know what you're talking about. But Cam Ward, he will be.
If you know anything, you know that those guys all happen to be employed by the Tennessee Titans, which means I'm going into Thursday night with some suspense as to what the Chiefs do. I'm going into Thursday night with no suspense about who the number 1 pick is. I'm pretty sure it's going to be your guy, Cam Ward.
Yeah, kind of following him all season. And this is a guy who was a 0-star recruit out of high school, started college at Incarnate Word. He had no offers. Nobody wanted him to play football. Goes to Incarnate Word, balls out there, goes to Washington State, balls out there, but has huge turnover issues. He actually declared for the NFL draft last year, but he was going to get like a 6th, 7th round grade. And Miami convinced him to come back to college, and now he's going to be a potential probable number 1 pick.
Yeah.
I really think Cam Ward is the real deal. He's almost like everything that people thought Johnny Manziel was going to be. Cam Ward actually is that, but he's a responsible human being. He has the respect of his teammates, and he's a coach's kid, so he really knows how to rally some of these guys. So it's going to be exciting to see kind of what happens there. But after that, I know a lot of people talking about maybe Shedeur Sanders, Abdul Carter, Gabe. Shedeur Sanders, not a long career at Colorado, is him and Travis Hunter, both of them getting their jersey retired out there in Boulder. Coach Prime has really been shaking the pot here in college football. What do you make of Shedeur and Travis Hunter getting their jerseys retired after they didn't even spend 4 years? 2 years, I believe they
went
spent Boulder.
13-12 in 2 years at Colorado, made 1 bowl game, got blown out in that bowl game in the Alamo Bowl against BYU. I think Big 12 fans who watched it last year in particular would say that it's a little insane that certain individuals from previous Colorado teams in the 90s remain without their jerseys retired, and now you're just handing it to Shedeur Sanders. When I can understand Travis Hunter, he won the Heisman. He brought he's
played both ways. It was a sensational
one of the best
story.
players in the program history. Shedeur yeah, he's one of the best players in program history, but Cordell Stewart still hasn't had his number retired, and he helped Colorado win a national championship. So that seems a little bit absurd to me. But as far as it goes for the NFL draft and for Shedeur and Travis Hunter, I'm fascinated to see where Travis Hunter ends up, and the experiment of a guy playing two ways. As for Shedeur, my whole stance on quarterbacks in the NFL draft and where they end up and where they wind up is I want the good ones in the NFC and I want the bad ones in the AFC. There was a decent level of that success in last year's draft where I think Caleb Williams is still a work in progress. We'll see what he looks like with a new head coach and new offensive mind in Chicago. Jaden Daniels,
line,
Jaden Daniels in the NFC I think is a good thing because I think he's probably the best quarterback in that past year's draft. Drake May in New England, who knows? But I think that I'm out on Shedeur Sanders as a elite quarterback in the NFL, and thus I am okay with an AFC team drafting him. So if he ends up in Cleveland, I think that's a win for AFC fans who are sick of seeing these superhero quarterbacks come into the AFC, and we've got Mahomes and Josh Allen and Justin Herbert and Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson. It just seems like every single team has an incredible quarterback. I didn't even list off C.J. Stroud, or there's several others. I think if Shedeur ends up in the AFC, everybody else can breathe a sigh of relief that at least one AFC team is wasting a couple years on a guy who I think is just a meh prospect and probably wouldn't be a first-round pick if his dad wasn't who he is. But it seems like there's a little bit of rumors that he could be going to the Giants at 3. So I don't know. We'll see how it could be. He could slide. Who knows? I think that's probably one of the most fascinating storylines for next Thursday.
Yeah, no, watching where Shedeur Sanders ends up is because there are some mock drafts have him as number 3, number 2, and then there are some mock drafts that have him like 20.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like it seems like there's not a really good industry consensus on his ability, but I'm also really fascinated to see the Travis Hunter experiment because I know obviously he wants to play both ways at the next level, but Gabe, the NFL is a freak show on both sides, all three sides of the ball. Let's include special teams. Those guys are absolute 99th percentile athletes. Do you really think, because I'm skeptical, do you think Travis Hunter can play both ways in the National Football League?
Yeah, I think he can. I don't think he's going to play like 100% of the snaps like he did at Colorado, but I mean, I was there at Arrowhead this year when Colorado played KU, and it was incredible to watch.
Yeah, he's a ball snatcher.
Not only and he was amazing in that game offensively, and he's by most regards a much better cornerback than he is a wide receiver. And so if he plays all the defensive snaps and he's your wide receiver 3 or wide receiver 4 and he's playing 30-40% of the snaps on offense, because even we talk about it all the time with the Chiefs and the wide receivers and who's on the field, how much they're on the field. Wide receivers are not on the field 85-90% of the snaps more often than not. So if he is a elite cornerback and he is a rotational wide receiver who has the athletic ability that he does, yes, that's worth picking in the top 5. So I would love to see it, and I can't wait to see where he ends up.
Yeah, I'm really fascinated to see how this all shakes out, because it's just like I feel like I mean, I can't, but I feel like the guy's playing both ways. I feel like at the end of some of these games, like we saw Travis Hunter was just exhausted. Like if we could just get Travis Hunter at 100, not to say that he wasn't, but if he could stay, like, you know, if he just focused on one side of the ball, like would his talents elevate?
But there's so many more snaps in a college game.
Yeah, there are. It's a much longer. It's a very different game. The hashes are different. Everything about it. It's the ball is literally different.
Yeah.
It's a completely different sport. But the NFL draft coming up in a little bit. Some local prospects also could be first-round picks. We'll be looking at those stories. We got a couple odds and ends here to kind of close out our show. We're going to start with the Missouri gymnastics team. Gabe, I don't know if you saw this, but they're in the 4 on the floor. I love that name. In the national championship for the first time in gymnastics. Came down, Missouri was a 7 seed. They're taking on the Florida Gators. It came down to the final event, the balance beam, and a redshirt senior who had actually taken a step away from gymnastics for a year, put up a perfect score, and everyone went wild. Gabe, what do you think how about that? Missouri women gymnastics in the national championship. What are your thoughts?
They've had a pretty significant week in terms of the the sports that we're not always paying a ton of attention to. I know today Mizzou softball beat the #1 team in the country, Texas A&M. So yeah, there's
about what's going on in
good
Columbia.
things going on in Columbia for their non-revenue sports. So.
Yeah, a lot going on there. So congrats to them. Also on the ice in hockey, the KC Mavericks are the top seed in the Western Conference tonight. They host the Tulsa Oilers out there at Cable Dahmer Arena. Gabe, last year, KC Mavs, Kelly Cup final. They ended up getting the league runner-up. I don't know if you've been out there to a game, but just what do you think of the Mavericks and obviously the success they've had?
It seems like every year they're in this kind of spot, and they've had some success in the playoffs. I've not been able to get out to a game at Cable Dahmer is electric. It's on the bucket list for things to do in Kansas City. But yeah, they're in the contention for another title this year, and we'll see if they're able to get over the hump from second place last year to winning it all this season.
Yeah, they're the top seed in the Western Conference, and their actual head coach, Tad O'Had, is the winningest head coach in KC pro hockey history. So you had the Blaze, you had the Scouts, you had all the hockey teams that have ever played here. Tad O'Had, in addition to having a legendary name, is the winningest hockey head coach, professional in KC history. And I know a couple weeks ago, or maybe a couple months ago, I went out and did a story with him just kind of talking about what is the Mavs' key to success? Like, how do they continue to replicate such good teams year in and year out? And he didn't talk about strategy. He didn't talk about anything like that. He talked about personal relationships and about how it's about having tough and honest conversations with players. And it's just very interesting to hear a very successful head coach. He wasn't saying, oh, our penalty kill is great or we have all these great things. He was like, no, we have great relationships. I prioritize the relationship over anything else. So the KC Mavericks, good luck to them here in the playoffs, starting that tonight. Cable Dahmer Arena. The game is actually tonight at 7 p.m. on our sister station, KSMO. We will also have tomorrow's game 2 at 6 p.m. on KSMO. So a bunch of good stuff going on there, Gabe. I think that's pretty much all we have. You got anything else to add today, or?
Looking forward to next week. Lots on the horizon for the Chiefs.
Yes. Oh, one final note, actually. The KU and K-State Sunflower Showdown in baseball. Neil Jones is out there. We have highlights of that coming up tonight at 10. But both teams playing well, and there's a sellout out there up in Lawrence. So we'll have a lot of stuff going on here. We'll recap of that coming up tonight at 10. But for here at 5:30, that's it. Have a good one, everybody.